Hi guys, I'm Dana Al-Hanbali and this is Something to Consider. We live in a world obsessed with doing more, faster, where aging is something to fight and recovery is often neglected until it becomes a necessity. But what if aging wasn't something to fear, but something to understand? What if wellness wasn't a vague aspiration, but a data-backed, measurable, and deeply personal science? My guest today, Dr. Elie AbiRached, a longevity expert and biohacker with a PhD in functional health. As a wellness entrepreneur and faculty member of the Geneva College of Longevity Science, he helps individuals optimize their health and cognitive function for peak performance. Dr. Elie is the founder of Restore Fitness and Limitless Human, and someone who's not only advocating for optimal living in the Middle East, but actively building the infrastructure to make it real. He brings together ancient wisdom, modern science, and next-gen diagnostics to challenge everything we think we know about health, aging, and performance. In this conversation, we talk about the myths of productivity, the measurable art of sleep, and why the future of wellness isn't a supplement, it's a lab report. We ask whether biohacking is just another wellness trend or whether it marks the beginning of something more integrative, more intentional, and more human. We explore the difference between wellness and well-being, the weight of toxic burden, and the idea that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply ask, have I done everything in my power? Dr. Elie reminds us that the hardest journey is the one between the head and the heart, and that real wellness isn't about escaping discomfort, but about choosing how we meet it. This isn't a conversation about longevity. It's about optimal living. And it's one that might just shift how you think, feel, and move through the world. Dr. Elie, welcome to the show, and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. How are you feeling today?
Good. Not too bad, not too bad.
I usually start the show with a question that sets the stage for the conversation we're about to have. So what do we need to know about the context of your life to set the stage for this conversation?
So, first of all, it's been a lifelong pursuit. It wasn't something overnight. It wasn't something that happened in the last 12 months, like most of the things that we see around us at the moment. It's been decades in the making. And just like with everything else that I introspect on, I wanted to also understand why I have this fascination with all of the stuff that I'm kind of involved in. And a lot of it, I think, I'm still working on it, I think has to do with where I grew up, part of my childhood. So being also from Lebanon yourself, that was an environment where I think it pushed me to be as strong as I can possibly be, not realizing, obviously, at the time that that's what was happening. But even at the age of 12, 13, I was obsessed with being strong, pull-ups, push-ups, this. It was very difficult to do, much. We were not even going to schools at the time, and there was so much, that was happening within, it still is, obviously. So I think I felt that I needed to be strong for the environment. Such a violent, teenage years to be part of and all of that. So I think this is where it stemmed from. And then it became a lifelong thing. I felt always that I am at my best with my friends, with my family, with decisions that I make about my life when I'm healthy, when I'm strong. And that was intuitive. It wasn't something that I had to kind of figure out or something. I was fortunate enough to feel that strength benefiting me. And then this is at the essence of everything that I do, I think is that message that I try to pass on to people, or that feeling I try to instill in others. So at the end of the day, all of this is funny, right? Like one day you're here, one day you're not. All this talk about longevity as if we are in complete control, like we're going to live 120, we're going to live 140. So that exhausts me a little bit. It's about now. Longevity is now. And longevity in general for me doesn't make much sense. It's more about healthy aging because I can control what I put into my mouth, what I put onto my skin, what I wash my hair with, the air that I breathe sometimes, and so on. And therefore, there's no excuse moving forward, so on where your health should be. We always, as human beings, we all are the same. We find excuses for everything. We find excuses for why things go wrong for us, why the world owes us so much, all of these different things. And I refuse to be that. Without arrogance or anything. It's just I'm still on a journey. That's why every time someone calls me an expert, it makes me uncomfortable. I'm more, I think, of a strategist. So I kind of try to figure out ways to live my life in the best way possible. And I very quickly realized through learning, through experience, after decades of doing this, that there are no specific hacks. Maybe we'll get into that a little bit more later. There are no specific hacks, but more of balance throughout. Mental, physical, emotional, social, environmental, all of these. I think that's a very long answer.
No, but I feel like you provided so much context, not just for what brought you here and the conversation we're about to have, but the way that you see this industry altogether. I remember when I first heard you speak, one of the most interesting aspects of just listening to you is how intentional you are about the integration of different schools of thought, whether we're talking about consciousness, the philosophy of being, and health from a well-being perspective. With all this terminology being thrown around, I feel like it gets a bit intimidating. So one question I would like to ask you, you made a very conscious effort to show that there's a distinction between wellness and well-being. Could you please define both?
Definition is difficult, I think, but wellness right now, the term has been thrown around so easily. There are dentists that now run wellness clinics. There are aesthetic clinics that now are wellness clinics. There are spas that are now wellness clinics. So it kind of blurred. What does wellness mean? So for me, what it means is what I just talked about, is that whole balance of everything. I think for most people, what wellness means is a moment in time where I feel my best. Like I go to a wellness space and I get a massage and I feel relaxed and it's awesome. And then I go back to my grind and whatever, So is that wellness? That's not wellness for me, So when we're talking about wellness, I'd rather think about it from a well-being perspective. We are beings. We exist, we interact. Everything around us makes us who we are, and we contribute to everything around us. Every hand you shake, every table you touch, every handle you open, every button in an elevator you press, every conversation that we have, every air, every water, everything that we do makes us who we are. It contributes to our microbiome. It contributes to our health. It contributes to how well our bodies are equipped to handle the environment that we're in. These incredible organisms that are able to adjust to almost any environment. Leave a body long enough in a place and it will adapt and thrive in it if you're smart about it, if you're learning. So that's why when I speak about whatever it is that I do in a context of where we are, it's important for us to recognize that where we are is part of our well-being. Your whole environment, the dust that is on your skin, that you see on your cars and whatever, the ACs that you use, the people that you meet, the diversity of individuals that come to this country or this region in general, all contributes to my well-being. The opportunities that are provided to me in this country is contributing to my well-being. The social opportunities is contributing to my well-being. So as a being where I know my own consciousness and I know that I exist, and therefore I have a responsibility to interact with the environment, with the other beings that are around me, and all of that contributes to my own health or wellness. I'm not,
I never actually thought about it like that. So hypothetically, by your definition, I don't even know what to call it, the way that you would evolve the way you stay well it evolves depending on how your context changes. It's not a one answer thing. It really does depend on the context of where you are.
100%.
Okay.
100%. And it depends on where you are in your head. It depends on all these continuous inputs that are happening throughout, from how well you sleep, to the sort of meal that you ate the night before, to the energy interchange that you've had with the last person that you were with. It's a constant moving thing. And I think if there is, for me, the closest definition for having or optimizing your well-being is constantly striving in balance or striving for balance in that environment where, let's say, you exchange energy, someone is, taking yours. How do you restore balance? You eat something you don't agree with, or you don't understand why your body doesn't react to it because you haven't done the right testing or whatever. How do you restore balance? And so on,
That being said, though, what you're saying, again, goes back to being very intuitive and in tune with what you need.
Right.
In contrast to what the term biohacking alludes to. Because for me, a hack means short-term, fast solution, not necessarily in tune with what you need, but more likely to get you closer to what you want. So can you speak a little bit about what this idea of biohacking is supposed to mean?
Yeah, so I think there is no such thing as biohacking, by the way, as far as I'm concerned.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So the actual term, the way people understand it, that doesn't exist.
Okay.
Biohacking essentially is truly understanding your internal environment and your external environment. And what I love about it also is that it doesn't end there. You also need to understand where you came from and how you can possibly impact the future so you can make it better. And the people around you.
I like that.
So that's what biohacking is. So when you think of it as shortcuts, when you think of it as the latest drug, and you think of it, that could be a small, tiny part of it. But unfortunately, there are quite a few characters out there, especially in the West, that need to make this sensational, need to make it money-making. For me, that doesn't jive. It doesn't work for me. When I'm talking about my own well-being, I'm not looking for entertainment. I'm not looking for the next, Netflix documentary that talks about 120 different supplements that I take in order for me, or take my son's blood so I can be younger, and like all of that. That's not biohacking. This is, I don't know what that is. I don't want to comment on something that perhaps I haven't done my, enough research on it, because it doesn't interest me. But biohacking for me is simply understanding your nature and not denying any aspect of it. Your ethnicity, where you come from, where your lineage, your DNA, all of that impacts who you are. So therefore, biohacking for me is a pseudoscience, if you like. So you're able to get data, use that data to your advantage, experiment and see what works for you, and try to optimize yourself in an environment or within the limits of the environment that you're in, because you can't escape that. Like, you can do all sorts of crazy things, but these would be only temporary.
Interesting. It's just listening you talk about this reminds me very much of the journey that is encouraged when you're working with a psychologist. And it's really about kind of understanding the backstory to your own story in an attempt to understand where you are now. So there's an interesting parallel in terms of how it goes together, and this idea of it not just being about medicine, but integrative medicine.
Correct.
You've seen the data, you've done the research. What are some of the most surprising habits or factors that you have seen that most likely predicts a longer or more optimal life for people in general?
So over and over and over again, what I found is that muscle is one of the most important things you could have. It holds your bone together. It holds all of your mitochondria. It keeps you active as you grow older. It keeps you from falling and breaking a bone. There's so much that it contributes towards. So that movement in general, because movement is life as far as I'm concerned. So that's one of the things that I focus on. However, what is always overlooked is the importance of where your mind is at. Who we are as individuals, we always have cornerstones. I'm a victim, I'm a mother, I'm a father, I've been abused, I have trauma, whatever it may be. And then all of our story that we build for ourselves is based on all of these different cornerstones that we make for ourselves. And most of us are not aware of these cornerstones. We just know that I'm overweight, I am sad, I am unsuccessful, my luck is bad, people are not treating me the way I deserve to be treated. All of these different things, and not taking charge of their own lives and understand what is the basis of my story. And think of it as a story. It's just that, and stepping away from it, and stepping from a story and becoming more of a human being, of you being right now interacting with others, understanding how to approach your life from that perspective, where literally everything is here for you, not here against you. Once you begin to make that shift, once you begin to release yourself from that story and think of yourself as someone I'm here to contribute. And all of this, I perhaps take a little too seriously. Again, as we started the conversation, we're here now, a minute later, we're not. That for me really grounds me. The silliest of things, if you're allergic, you could be stung by a bee and die, the strangest things happen for us as human beings, as organisms, but we take ourselves way too seriously. And when we think of biohacks, it just sounds sexy.
Yeah.
It just sounds that the shortest possible cut for me to get from A to B, And it's not true. There are no shortcuts in that sense. There could be temporary ones, maybe. But in general, it's a journey. And there's no end game. What would be the end game in something like this, in well-being, in biohacking, let's say? What is it? And all of it is so new that we don't have people that lived 140 years or 120, to be 120, to tell us about, and how would that look even?
Anymore.
Yeah, right.
Anymore. There was a time when they did exist, and it makes me wonder, did they get it right in terms of the way that they lived, the way they nourished themselves, but also in the communities that they lived as.
Yeah.
They weren't as hyper independent as so many of us are. I'm curious though, you mentioned this idea of time, or alluded to it a few times. Don't you think that there's an element of fear to that? And is that fear something that drives you, if it is fear?
Oh, 100%. So when we look at our own motivations, in my opinion, is that we're all obviously afraid of dying. Like, we don't understand what that is. And reconciling this, and there's so many cultures around the world that praise death. It is part of life. I'm not sure if I am that evolved, or I have moved forward enough for me to really reconcile death, but I constantly work on it. Am I afraid of it? Maybe. I think I'm more afraid of the pain than the actual death. Because, not knowing what's on the other side, like walking into a dark room, that sort of thing. For us to be aware is key. So definitely fear plays a super important role. I think I fear more, for example, something like Alzheimer's. I fear more someone has to carry me to bathe. I fear more, dying alone, that sort of thing. So you need to make that shift. And if you're doing this for the wrong reasons, I think you will always get it wrong anyway. So if you're doing it simply because I want to outlive everyone, why would that matter? Imagine, So when people did live to 120, or there's still some around, obviously, I don't think that's what the current individuals are hoping to live 120. I don't think they're looking to be like that.
Yeah.
They're hoping to still be exactly as they are right now. And we're not sure. We don't know. There's a lot that we don't know. And we, as I said earlier, we don't know what we don't know.
Yeah.
And this is something we have to continuously repeat to ourselves. And as I've done this, and even further, as it's like, being at the beach, like right here in Jumeirah, you walk in, it's nice and shallow, and you think you understand exactly what's happening. And then as you go in, you get deeper and deeper and deeper, and you think, oh my God, there's no end to this. So you're always learning. And to say absolute truth, I've learned a long time ago not to do that. And I've been wrong many, many times. And I need to reconcile this and admit it and learn from it and move forward. But at the time when I say something, I believed it, I've tested, I know that this water is good for me, so I'm going to drink it. Maybe something else will come to light and it won't be. Be aware of that. There are no absolute truth. And as you can see from all the noise out there, where people contradicting each other, talking about, people living long, blue zones, people, this, that, there's so much misinformation out there that we're trying to build our own longevity on, that people have almost given up. They say, well, if I say this, someone else will come and say, no, this is no good.
Yeah.
So we need to come to terms with ourselves taking responsibility for our own health. And that's really what excites me about the period that we're in right now.
Yeah, I do think, look, accountability plays a huge role in terms of taking ownership of the life that you want to live. Yes. And not living in that victim mindset, as you so rightly said. Yeah. But what I find so interesting is that, us as humans, we're so uncomfortable with uncertainty. We're so uncomfortable with not having all the answers. So I would almost argue that so many of these theories, hacks, basically the monetization of the quote unquote wellness or well-being space is all an attempt to try and come up with these finite answers, which makes me wonder how much of this, or how much of well-being is about healing, especially if you're starting your journey a little bit later in life and it's not something you necessarily grew up with. How much of it is around healing, and how much of it is just another form of control?
If you're looking at content creators, if you're looking at these characters that we talked about earlier, all of it is about money. And if you're outsourcing your life, your health, your well-being to someone who, or something that doesn't have your best interest at heart, there isn't a marketer out there that is marketing a toothpaste or a supplement that has your best interest at heart. You need to wise up. That trust in, if I pick something off a shelf and it's good for me, I think we're wising up to that. And now we're turning that bottle around and looking. And even with that, there are issues with it because there are constant ways of hiding the truth of what is inside a bottle that you're taking. So most information, I think I would go as far as say all information, if you don't investigate yourself, if you don't see, because there are two aspects to this. One is that you cannot depend on someone else. It's not, so the traditional physician-doctor mentality of, I have an ailment, I'll go to a doctor will prescribe something and that ailment will go away. We know now, after decades, that that's not the case. It doesn't help us living longer, better, etc. We've seen over and over and over again, one thing is fixed, 10 other things are broken. Because we're not changing the foundation, we're not understanding the causes, we're not focusing on that. Because we feel we have more important things to do in our lives, such as work, or start a business, or I don't know, all of that other things that we prioritize ahead of the foundation of who makes us who we are. So I think the key element here in all of this is that you must take charge of your own health. And as I said a little earlier, the exciting thing about the times that we're living in right now for me is that now it's becoming a lot more possible for us to take that. We just need to take the time. And then a few of us out there that perhaps, you can kind of get a leg up or ask a question or whatever, that's the best that we can do. We don't have all the answers because I am not you. I can guide you on certain things, stuff that perhaps I got to read that you haven't read yet, that maybe I could share my information on that. But that's really all nutritionists, gut health specialists, everyone really can do.
Yeah.
We're all unique. We all have our own journey, and we all carry baggage. And just quickly here to touch on our life stories again, because it's super important. Sometimes it's more interesting for us, because we get more attention, to play the person that is sick than the person that is healthy. Healthy is not sexy. Healthy, if you're healthy, people almost envy you or like hate you a little, because
Or ignore you.
Or ignore you, But if you are someone who is always this and that, always looking for sympathy, it makes them feel good, and then it makes you feel good because making them feel good, or the fact that you're being thoughtful with them makes you feel good, that you're being kind to another human being. So that perpetuates that cycle. I don't want to feel great, because when I do, what would I talk about?
Yeah.
So yeah.
That's interesting. That makes me wonder, do you have an experience in your life that almost humbled you in the way that you see your own stories and how you approach your own well-being?
Oh, 100%. I think, if I would have hated to answer that question with no. Like I would have, oh my God, definitely. There's so many. And this is perhaps the foundation of everything that I do. It revolves around that, of me being very skeptical about everything. With an open mind, obviously. I'm constantly learning, constantly. And there are so many times where I think, oh, I've got this. And then by the time that I say it, I realize that I'm actually regressing. I'm not moving forward. I mean, I've worked hard on my biological age, but then I wake up one day and I do a test and it's like, no, it's not what it used to be, And that's okay, because other things get in the way. And what that quickly taught me is that there are no end games. It's a constant journey. You either prioritize it or you don't. It's no one else's responsibility. You cannot blame the weather. You cannot blame the heat. You cannot blame your job. You cannot blame your chair, your desk, your boss. You cannot blame any of this. You need to take charge. The more you know, the better you can manage what's happening to you.
We talk a lot about growth, performance, optimization, longevity. What I found interesting about what you also focus a lot on is this idea of recovery.
Yes.
And I feel like it's also something that is very much dismissed. Again, it's a Band-Aid or a patch to get us through the day.
Yeah.
Can you speak a little bit about the importance of recovery in this journey in terms of navigating life and well-being?
We have the tendency of, if something makes us feel good, more is better. And in my experience, more is never better. Always balance, again, going back to that idea. So one of them is exercise. Exercise is great. It releases endorphins, makes you feel strong. The sweating, the whole experience is just amazing. And then you want more and more of that. But the body is not given enough time for recovery. So recovery is always an afterthought. We were doing a show the other day, and one thought occurred to me, is that not long time ago, like 10 years ago, maybe 20 years ago, even shorter than that perhaps, we used to brag on how little we sleep, because that meant that I'm successful. I don't need sleep. I am invincible. I could run, I can break, I can, play the stock market, all of these movies, remember?
Yeah.
But now there's a shift happening. People are now understanding, so in the last decade or so, from Google to all these different businesses, some of it is obviously, for marketing purposes or whatever that, whatever the motivation is, but there's a lot more awareness of wellness in the workplace, creating spaces for people to take breaks, to take naps, to all of that. So now there's a little bit of a shift where, no, it's no longer an embarrassing thing that you actually take care of your sleep. So when it comes to recovery, what I'm finding right now is that most people are overworked. And I don't mean just work as in traditional, how I make my living, even in workouts. People overdo it. Now, this maybe has come to good news to a lot of people, because those that say, for example, oh, I only do 2 or 3 days a week, well, that's not enough.
Yeah.
You need to be doing more. I'm talking about individuals that more is better, that I work out as often as I possibly can. Or if I do, and that's perhaps fine, but if I don't integrate in my workout routine, just equally as important, a recovery routine, it's not doing your body any favors.
And what would that look like? What is recovery? Is it the fancy tools? Is it a massage? Is it an off day? Like what do you mean?
So recovery is a combination of things for me. One is the mental recovery, having time for yourself. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So walks. Recovery is never rest, just sitting down, just lying down, Sleep, you get plenty of recovery through that. So if you prioritize it, that will contribute to recovery. Another one is finding something that you enjoy and then do it. Recovery is always movement. Active recovery is the best recovery that you can do. Not strained recovery, active recovery. Being out in nature, that's part of recovery. Sitting and having a good, decent, honest conversation like the one we're having right now is part of recovery, because it stimulates different hormones within your body that help you to feel better, So recovery is not just on the cellular level, it's the whole being altogether. So the tools, they're just that. They're for convenience. So let's say I don't have time to spend time in the sun. Maybe I'll do some red light at home, right? So they provide less of an excuse for you not to do something, And there are ones that perhaps not necessarily available in nature. And that's what I normally say to people. There is nothing that you need that is not available in nature.
I love that.
You just need to make the effort.
Yeah.
Nothing that you could buy is indispensable. They are there, almost like everything. They are there for convenience. So if you're stranded on a desert island, you find ways for you to survive and thrive using your brain. You don't have, your precious mattress. You don't have a fridge that you open and you get whatever. You find ways. So we always do. However, in the way we live our lives, we're constantly trying to more. We live in a house that could fit 100 people, where at one time we lived in a cave that is as small is better, because it's easier to warm up. It's safer because you understand, if any predator is going to come in, etc. So the priorities change. And all of that is contributing to us not living as healthy as we can possibly be.
Or as optimally. That's such a mindset shift, because I think also when we think about rest, or at least I'll speak about myself, I always associated it to that idea of doing nothing. But this idea of active rest and looking for different ways to stimulate yourself that isn't going to strain you, even if it is as still as sleep, that's a beautiful mindset shift. I really like that. And what I like about it is it leads to my next question. You've almost made this idea of the pursuit of well-being a lot more accessible than it seems.
Because it is.
Yeah.
Because it is. Perhaps the aha moment for me is when well-being became part of my the things that I do. It's not something that I had to think about in order for me to do.
It's already integrated in your life.
It's integrated in you. That's I think is the secret to living well. I have a little treadmill that I work on, on my desk, because people tell me, I don't have time to walk outside. I don't have time to do this. I don't have to always. So, but you have time to go to a fancy restaurant and you have time to buy your most expensive bag that you could find. You have time to shoot this, that, whatever. Now, what are your priorities? If you're prioritizing spending your money on these things, great. They make you happy, amazing. But the priorities are not right. Because if you have the tiniest of pain, you do not enjoy your expensive bag, you do not enjoy, the meal that you're paid so much for, all of that. So priorities are out of whack when it comes to people. And as I said, we're really good with excuses, really good. because it makes us feel better about the wrong choices that we make. So integrating it into your lifestyle is absolutely key. What I do is I try to stack things, So by stacking, now with supplements, stacking supplements is popular too. So you buy one supplement and it has like a longevity blend, or it has a gut blend, and like a few things together there are. Not sure about that. But stacking well, for your well-being helps you to integrate it into your lifestyle. So for example, while working, I'm standing up and I'm on my treadmill. I'm stacking these two instead of me, saying I'm working, I can't do this, or I need to walk, therefore I can't work. So stacking things together so you could do them at the same time. While walking outside, I do breath work. If I'm doing breath work, I could be at the same time listening to your podcast, at the same time learning something new. So I'm stacking these three together. It doesn't always have to be one thing. As long as you're not getting out of your way or forcing yourself, do what you enjoy. But you can stack things in order for you to reap greater benefits.
And to your point, I think when you do all these little micro intentional things and they become a part of your day, compounded, it leads to living that, intuitive, wellness-driven life or well-being driven life. That's very interesting. But I have a question for you. The way that you talk about your routine, it's very intentional. You're consciously making these micro decisions, which for the average person or the average entrepreneur that will think of a million excuses of why this doesn't work for them.
Right.
It's an inconvenience. It takes up time and energy and, mental capacity that could be going to other things. And at the same time, the wearables, the rings, the watches, the tracking, and there's a stress to all of these things that you need to keep track of. So I'm curious about, one, this idea of overwhelming data almost consuming your life. And two, and I want to be real about this, the democratization of this industry becomes quite difficult when it's attached to all these external tools that you need to, not everyone has the privilege of having access to all of these things. So I'm curious to know about how you feel about that. Yeah,
it's an interesting one. And it's still, because there aren't enough data in general, funny use that word, in the past few years. I mean, Whoop is like 10 years old. Fitbit, if you remember it, it was 10, 15 years old.
Something it's a bit older.
Yeah. So we don't have enough of that. But one thing is for sure. But let me go back just 1 second. So it always makes me a little uncomfortable when people ask me about what do you do to stay healthy? That works for me. It doesn't necessarily work for you. Find what works for you.
Fair.
So I share them reluctantly. I share them out of respect. I share them because maybe it will apply to you too. But then people say, I can't wake up at 4 o'clock. What do you mean sleep at 8:30? That's for me. I have to do this. I have to do that. I'm not offending you. This is what works for me. Try to find something that works for you, that makes you feel good about yourself, that you have measurable results of. My measurable results is how I feel, how strong I am, what my biological age is, how little I fall sick, the energy that I have during the day. All of that different things help me say, yes, this works for me. So this is where data can be interesting. However, most of these data companies, they love your data. They could build businesses on. They could resell it. They could do all sorts of things with it. Now, do I worry myself about this? Do I like it? No. But do I worry myself about it? I do not. 1. 2, my recommendation to people when it comes to data, it's useful. But at the end of the day, it is not all-knowing. That's 1. 2, always remember that it's very influential. It influences you. If I put an iPhone in front of you where it tells you you are tired today, regardless if you are or you're not, you become tired. They're extremely powerful. So your mind trusts that technology in a way, that algorithm that is literally depending on a few sensors on your wrist, on your finger or whatever, to extrapolate a status, and it's telling you what your status is. A lot of it is perhaps fairly accurate. Let's say your temperature or the amount of REM sleep that you had or something like that. But if you are energetic for different reasons, because all these wearables can't measure where you are psychologically, can't measure where you are emotionally, can't measure
Correct.
how much human connection you have, can't measure the excitement that you have about your next vacation, all of that different things, right? So what I always recommend, and what I do myself, is I switch off notification. All of these different wearables don't like me saying that, but it's key. I look at overall averages. That's what matters to me. Because at the end of the day, it's not about how I felt last Saturday or how I slept on Monday evening. It's about how is the quality of my sleep overall and how is it contributing to my health. That's what I use wearables for.
You know what's interesting about everything that you just said? It presents such a stark difference in an industry that is run by people with a lot of opinions that are giving you one-shot wonders. And it almost goes back to positioning this idea of advocates or teachers as the ones that we really need. Because what I appreciate about what you said is it's about presenting the tools and the information to you and you deciding how that works for you and how that integrates into your life.
Exactly.
And then using something like data, which is purely there for you to understand and navigate what works for you, not for you to rely on or for it to dictate what others think should work for you.
Exactly.
And I think that's a very interesting contrast when we're looking at people that speak about this.
Yes.
But again, let's go back to the question around, the monetization of this industry. Not everyone can afford to have the wearables, to, go to a gym, to have a PT, to unfortunately eat healthier. I'm not telling you it's impossible because to your point, you said everything that we need is really available in nature. And that aligns with what I believe completely. But do you feel like there is almost an elitist complex to this idea of well-being that the privileged few only have access to?
Especially in longevity. Mm. There are so many gates to all sorts of different things. And that really gets under my skin. People that know me know that I am very much against, health being exclusive. So it's innate in us, unfortunately, because we compete with each other. We don't understand the oneness of everything. That in order for me to feel healthier, it is not possible unless you feel healthier too. Because you and I are one. Mm. If you were sick right now, you'd make me sick. If I optimize and spend thousands of dollars on my EBU and I sit in a hyperbaric chamber and I go to exotic islands where I could do all sorts of gene therapy, and then I come in, I sit in front of you, and I get a bug from you. And that's it. So real health happens when all of us are healthy. It cannot be exclusive. It's just not possible. We're all part of the same thing. So thankfully in an industry when it comes to tracking, which is, it's something, it's good to have, but it's not indispensable. I like it because I'm a geek that way. I'm an early adopter. I love that sort of thing. Mm. Thankfully I can afford it. But the industry is shifting. There are rings now that are much, much cheaper than when you first started. There are rings that don't have subscriptions to them. Mm. There are trackers that are, really, fairly affordable. Not necessarily the fancy ones, because if you look at anything, really a lot of the value of that thing is in the branding, because the branding is where all the money is spent. So you could buy a Nike shoe, for example, or you could buy any branded shoe. It would be 10 times as expensive as buying a generic one from a store. Most likely they'll be made at the same factory, but you're buying the brand.
100%.
So there are ways. Now, is it and would it stop me from being healthy if I don't have a tracker? No, it wouldn't.
100%.
Because I would have an innate connection with how my body is feeling. When you wake up in the morning, if you slept well or not. Mm. You don't need to look at a tracker to tell you, oh, you slept well, you know? So it's a good to have thing, maybe to understand certain in-depth data about, let's say, your REM sleep, your deep sleep, this, what's your HRV, what is your VO2, all of that other stuff. If you're into this sort of thing, but they're not a exclusive for your health, it doesn't work that way.
Very well put.
Yeah, we're taught to, we're pushed into, you cannot be healthy unless you have a wearable. You cannot be healthy unless you take this supplement.
Which is just marketing.
Exactly.
Interesting. You made an interesting comment about this idea of we're in constant competition with each other. And I definitely think that that also relates to our competition for, class and a bunch of other things. When we think about this industry, and you referenced it a few times, this idea of time, whether it's prolonging time or optimizing the time that you have now, it begs a more philosophical question that I'm curious about what you think.
Okay.
Time for what? Like, what are we really trying to do? I love what you said about if one person is sick, we're all sick, because that's how in tune we are. And the pandemic taught us that.
Yeah.
But really, what is it that we are supposed to be doing? I don't want to say supposed to be, but what do we need to think about doing more of? Why is time important? Why is the pursuit of living a more optimized life important for us as a community of humans?
So that's a deeply philosophical question. And I think once we go down that rabbit hole, I think there may not be a way back. But for me, it's all about now. Yeah. So the future, as I said, like 1 minute you're here, 1 minute you're not. I don't do this to gain more time. I do this to feel better now, to be able to do anything that I want to do right now. Now, could the next moment also be that? That's amazing. The moment after that, that's even better. Am I learning from what I'm doing right now so the next moment can be a little bit better? Yes, I am. If I think to myself for one moment that this is perfect, this is where I'm going to be, that's it, I'm done, then the next moment is not going to be better than this one, right? So the only way that the next moment you continue to become healthier, continue to become full of energy, to continue to become someone who sees clearly, has enough oxygen in their brain, they are active, they are contributing member of a society, they are useful for each other, caring about other people, doing things that that make you happy. You need to constantly be focusing on the now. So it's never, for me, about 20 years or 30 years from now. It all seems so...
Trivial,
exactly. So it's all about now. And when we think about the world that we live in right now and what's happening around the world, from all the pain, the suffering, the segregation, the separation, the gatekeepers, the silliness that is around, the hoarding, all of that. To each his own, not judging. And that's another one that is super important, I think, for all of us is, less judging is definitely contributing to your longevity. So if you put that in perspective, like things look different. It's not something that you should dwell on and worry about and carry the world on your shoulders, but you cannot also be blissfully ignorant about what is happening everywhere, how we are as a species, what do we do to each other, all of that. And this is just one other thing that we're hopefully approaching slightly better than we've done with other things. We are incredibly good at killing each other, right? Like we've demonstrated it over and over again. We're still demonstrating it, right?
Unfortunately.
Imagine if we apply that same zeal into making each other healthy, Can you imagine what the possibilities are? But then again, we hoard it, So when peptides were made more public, certain people were using them for decades,
Wow.
Absolutely. So, and so many things are like that. Like right now, there are certain therapies that are not approved in certain parts or whatever that people are doing that cost thousands and thousands of dollars. And they're seeing certain results from them. But again, it's prohibited for other people because it's of the financial implication. So it still exists. And again, it goes back to the point where it does not have to go that far. If you're able to see the wholeness of who you are, if we're able to get over the fact that me against you, I'm going to be younger than you, I'm going to live longer than you, I'm going to know something and it's good, therefore I'm not going to share it with you, because then if you know about it, then I'm no longer special. And that specialness only happens if we both know about it. It's an irony, you know? So it's all of, this is how I look at things. And I think what makes me different, at least if I am different, I'm not quite sure. Again, no absolutes. Is perhaps because I've been around a little bit longer than most people that are in this space. And I have nothing to prove. I do this because I enjoy it. Do I have a voice that people sometimes like to listen to? Great. Am I making impact for even one person a day? I think I am, which is awesome. Do I contribute to people feeling better sometimes? Sometimes I do. Awesome. You know? So what else can you ask?
Yeah.
That's what living for me is.
Oh my gosh, there are so many ways. Like I want to drift off into segues and take this further. But you know what's interesting about everything that you said? In a very strange way, and I think it comes from the way that you function personally. You're driven by kind of almost the moral or the ethical necessity of wellness in the broader scheme of things. And I think that's what makes it interesting to have a conversation with you about that, because you talk about perspective, you talk about your own way of life. And I think that's great. I think it's important for people to hear. And that's what the show is all about. It's about looking at things from another perspective. But I think what's uncomfortable about perspective for a lot of people is it forces them into this place where they have to be accountable for their own choices.
Right.
And that's a difficult, not even difficult, I just think that's an uncomfortable place to be for a lot of people.
For some people, it's impossible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We, as human beings, I feel, like to be the victims of our own circumstance.
Absolutely, yes, yeah.
Dr. Elie, I want to end this episode with a question that I ask all my guests.
We're done already?
Yes. Can you believe it? I'm telling you, there was not enough time. Like and I wanted to delve deeper into the philosophical questions. Like I had so many questions for you and we haven't even touched the surface.
You'll come to my show and we'll do something together.
Inshallah. And I hope you will come back to mine.
Absolutely.
The question that I want to ask you today, or proverbially put the mic in your hand, what would you like me to consider? What would you want to ask me based on the conversation that we had today?
Oh my God, there's so many questions. We've met a couple of times, so I'm going to be very honest about all of this. We've met a couple of times and we've done some diagnostics on you. And when I first saw you today, one of the first questions that I asked you is that what have you done about those? And you said that you're going through that journey. Mm-hmm. My reaction to that, I didn't tell you, obviously, I didn't say, so I'm going to say it right now. I hope you don't mind.
No, go ahead.
Is that, why is it taking you so long?
Very good question.
What is more of a priority to you than you acting on the information that you have about your body? So that's what I would ask you.
Wow. That's a good question. Okay, so just for context, I did take a bioresonance test a couple of weeks ago. It was the first time that I took it. And I'm generally a skeptic when it comes to non-medical, non-lab-based results. However, I was so kind of intrigued by so much of what you said in your panel that it led me to want to go take that test. I don't think me not taking action in the form of a disciplined approach of this is now what my journey looks like or my next steps look like has to do with me not feeling that it's a necessity. I think it's important to me to look at it from multiple angles. And one thing that I've done on my end is I have gone and done the medical lab work to see how much of it coincides with the findings of the bioresonance test. Because as I told you when we first took it, I was shocked by the results.
Yes.
I was shocked at how something in 30 seconds was able to give me, it made me wonder, is this a self-fulfilling prophecy? Like, why was this able to...
That's good. Yeah. I love that.
But it's strange. Like, it made me think, okay, but like,
what
if, but also, is this, like, is it really real? Or am I just, is it because of the narrative in my head?
Yeah.
So it made me uncomfortable, to be honest.
Yeah.
But again, it's data that I found valuable. And I am on that journey. And I am very intentional about the steps that I'm taking. And my first step had to do very much with sleeping and what I'm putting into my body from the perspective of the food that I'm eating, the nutrients that I need for my specific blood type, and so. So I'm getting there, but I guess I'm someone that needs a little bit more time.
Let me just contribute one small thing.
Please do.
I love that you're skeptical about it. But please be skeptical about everything. Because even when it comes to labs, be skeptical about that.
Yeah.
A lot of it is subjective also. If you do the same test in one lab versus the same test in another lab, the results won't be identical.
Can you speak a little bit more to that?
Yes, absolutely. So do the same panel of blood with one lab and do the same panel of blood in another lab. The results won't be identical. There will be some deviations, maybe not major, but there will be deviations. What this tells us is that there is some human intervention into this. There is the way it is handled, what machines they use, all of that, right? So be skeptical. There are no absolutes, no matter what it is. And the more testing, the better. Obviously, diagnostics is key. And I think this is the main driver of what's happening right now. I compel people to do as much diagnostics as possible. That's step one. Step two is finding people that are able to interpret those results in a manner that works for you, and not just take this, do that sort of thing, but more of a personalized approach to you. And usually the main person in that whole journey is you, with a little help with maybe people like myself, So I am not the center of your health journey. I contribute, very sporadically. But you need to take charge of that. But the idea of the infallibility of lab tests, we know for a fact that that's not true. And just like everything else, whenever people are involved, etc. But diagnostics are changing the game, and they're getting better and better. And as long as, for example, at the gym, when you do your body composition, you go do it in the same time and time of day and general status every time.
Correct.
If you do it in one body composition machine and then you go to another gym and do it, it's a different...
That's a great example.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the thing, right? So use diagnostics in a way for you to see, am I progressing, yes or no? Under lost for word now, the conditions that these tests provide. But that's about it.
I heard, just one last thing before we go. Is it true that it's important to also test yourself when you are at, maybe not optimal, but a better health state than just when you are sick?
Well, it depends what you're doing it for, right? So... And how would you know if you're not testing yourself, right? How would you know you're optimally healthy if you're not testing yourself? So the first test that you do after a period of time, there are a couple of things that matter for me. One, it's a snapshot, right? It's like taking a picture. Like if I take a picture of you right now and you move around or you change shirt, are you a different person? Well, it's that moment there, right? So that's one. Two, it acts as a foundation for you to build upon. You make changes, you test again to see, right, did these changes impact the results? Have they improved them, yes or no, right? And then the interpretation of the results is super important. So depending on what you're using it for. So some people only test when they feel something is wrong to find out what was wrong. For me, on a regular basis, every 3 months or so, I do as many tests as I possibly can. And because I have access, I'm a little more fortunate. I could do them more frequently. But again, even when it comes to these, I never make them inaccessible. The times that I do them for free, others that I do them heavily discounted, because I recognize the person needs it. And I'm not going to hold them from doing it because of something as silly as money, right? It's important that you kind of take all of that with a grain of sand anyway, with a grain of salt, I mean.
Thank you for your time. Thank you for making the time to be here.
Of course, it's my pleasure.
What is the best way for people to connect with you offline?
Instagram usually is the best way.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. You gave us so much to consider.
Thank you so much.
And to our audience, as always, thank you for the privilege of your time. I hope that you too found something to consider.